There is electricity in the air like I haven't seen since the 16 big victory that we all had together.
We saw time and time again in primaries a Trump bump. And, of course, Ron DeSantis getting a visit over the weekend from President Trump. We'll find out if he can narrow that lead as these races come down to the wire. Heather?
Boy, it's an exciting time, though. I mean, and just for a midterm, it's unprecedented, really. Griff, thank you so much. Well, with 35 Senate seats on the ballot tomorrow, Republicans are fighting to hold on to their already razor-thin majority. Senator Thom Tillis, vice chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, predicts that the GOP will actually add red seats.
We're not only going to hold the majority, I think we're going to add to it. I believe that states like North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri are all trending in a positive direction. Our incumbents are doing very well. There may be a special election in Mississippi that will take another 3 weeks to sort out, but I'm also confident that we'll have a Republican coming back in that state. The president is right that we have to secure the border, and I think that putting troops down there to make it very clear that we want people who have a legitimate claim to asylum to come through the process and get that asylum granted. The Democrats are trying to create this false narrative that people in Washington and the state houses want to take it away. I simply don't see any path either on the basis of good policy or good politics. So people with pre-existing conditions are going to get covered, and our Republican majority that we're going to secure next week is going to work to that end.
Well, in order for Democrats to take control of the Senate, they will need to hold each of the 26 blue seats appearing on Tuesday's ballot, as well as flip 2 that are currently held by Republicans. I'm going to talk much more about this, break it down for you coming up. Well, more than a dozen Afghan military and police officers killed in an attack by the Taliban, the terror group attacking a security checkpoint designed to cut off a major supply route. Afghan officials say that 13 security forces were killed. The checkpoint was set up just 2 days ago and was destroyed in the attack. 8 insurgents were also killed. At least 4 other soldiers injured. A fallen American hero is coming home. Major Brent Taylor's remains set to arrive at Dover Air Force Base today after he was killed in an insider attack in Afghanistan on Saturday. The National Guardsman killed by Afghan forces that he was training during his 4th tour of duty. Taylor was on a leave of absence from his job as mayor of North Ogden, Utah. Now, GoFundMe page, an account, has been set up for his family. It's raised more than $200,000 so far. If you want to help, go to foxandfriends.com for more information. Well, breaking overnight, the Trump administration unleashing the toughest sanctions ever on Iran, the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. The move coming after the regime's violent behavior. Garrett Tenney live in our nation's capital with the Middle Eastern country's sick new threat. Good morning, Garrett.
Heather, good morning to you. Iran's president says his country is now facing a war situation with these heavy sanctions being reimposed. Military drills will be taking place over the next 2 days in a show of defiance to the U.S. And the timing of this move, with the sanctions being reimposed, coincides with the 39th anniversary of Iran seizing the U.S. embassy in Tehran, which thousands of Iranians celebrated Sunday, with many chanting "Death to America." On Friday, President Trump said these sanctions are meant to send a message.
Sanctions are starting on Iran, and, Iran is taking a very big hit. They're very serious sanctions. They're very big.
The sanctions target Iran's shipping, financial, and energy sectors, all key to the country's already struggling economy. The goal is to get Iran to curb its aggressive and destabilizing activities in the Middle East, which President Trump pointed to at a rally on Sunday.
I withdrew the United States from the horrible, one-sided Iran nuclear deal. And Iran's been a much different country.
The administration is getting some criticism back at home, though, from some of its own party, because several countries are receiving waivers from the sanctions that give them another 6 months to do business with the regime. On Fox News Sunday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said those countries just need a little more time to end their trading.
I've been at this in a long time. No one's going to argue that Secretary Pompeo isn't tough on Iran, and no one is going to argue that President Trump isn't doing the same.
The other parties of the nuclear deal continue to defend it and are trying to find a way to keep trade deals with Iran alive despite the U.S. sanctions. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said those countries that try to skirt these sanctions, they'll be targeted by the U.S. as well. Heather?
Yeah, 444 days those 52 Americans held from November 4th, 1979 to, January 20th, 1981. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're nearly 4,000 migrants now traveling through an area known as the Route of Death. The migrants pushing north in a region of Mexico where hundreds of people have disappeared. President Trump reinforcing his warning to the group as they march towards our border.
I am telling the caravans, the criminals, the smugglers, the trespassers marching toward our border, turn back now because you are not getting in. That's an invasion. I don't care what they say. I don't care what the fake media says. That's an invasion of our country.
Meanwhile, former President Obama calling efforts to secure the border a political stunt.
They're telling us that the single most grave threat to America is a bunch of poor, impoverished, broke, hungry refugees. They're even using our brave troops, sending them down as a political stunt.
We also told the crowd in Indiana that this is, quote, the most important election of our lifetimes. Well, how about this question? Are you a U.S. citizen? The Trump administration heading to federal court today to defend adding that question to the 2020 census. The lawsuit challenging the move argues that the question is discriminatory and that it's meant to scare immigrants into not responding. But the Trump administration says that it will actually help better enforce the Voting Rights Act. So we'll follow that for you. But let's switch gears for a moment. Let's talk about some sports. In a primetime battle of elite quarterbacks, Tom Brady and the Patriots come out on top.
Wide open. Well, there's two guys who are there, but it's Josh Gordon.
Brady leading New England past Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers 31-17. Meanwhile, over in New Orleans, the Saints hand the Los Angeles Rams their first loss of the season, 45-35. And the Pittsburgh Steelers win their fourth game in a row, topping the Baltimore Ravens 23-16. And a huge win for my Carolina Panthers. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 42-28. Good job. Well, the time now is about 11 minutes after the top of the hour, and hundreds of passengers forced to sleep on the floor. The flight fiasco that left people stranded for days. And 24 hours until voters head to the ballot box, and polls now show Democrats in a position to win back the House. But should we actually trust this prediction when the pollsters got it so wrong in 2016? Republican strategist Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. New polls now showing Democrats holding a slight edge in retaking the House as we are just hours from voters heading to the polls. But after pollsters predicted the presidency would go to Hillary Clinton back in 2016, should we trust the numbers that we're seeing now? Here to weigh in is Republican strategist and pollster John Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
So the latest poll shows that Democrats in the generic polling are up by, 7%, but they've actually dropped down. They were up by 9%.
So that's encouraging if you're a Republican. But let's step back just for a second and say, how do you look at polling? Because we know in 2016, the public polling was so wrong. So first of all, there's private polling that campaigns do and public polling that we talk about on the air. Most public polling has no incentive to actually get it right because there's no consequences. It's about breaking news, getting numbers out. Private campaign polls are a little different.
So private ones tend to be private, we don't hear about
exactly.
them.
You're never going to hear about those. We have an incentive because we deploy money based upon these polls, campaign ads, all that stuff. The other thing is when you look at these public polls, there are some good public polls and there's some terrible public polls. Fox News, I would say, does a good poll, meaning they use live people to call real people. There's a lot of polls out there that don't even use a robot to call your house, so they don't know actually who's picking up the phone. There are some public polls that don't even use likely voter models, they'll use the census as their turnout model, which has no correlation to who's actually going to turn out.
Right.
So we should be skeptical about these polls.
And when they use robots, if people are like me most of the time, if I, answer the phone and there's a pause and then a robot comes on, I immediately hang up.
You hang up, which means we have a harder time getting responses. But even more, if I'm calling Heather's house and I'm saying I want to talk to her, I could be getting your husband, I could be getting your brother. I have no way to confirm that. So we need to look at these polls skeptically, but polls can give us a trend lines, and that's kind of what we're looking for. So the tightening in the home stretch tells us that the electorate's starting to wake up, and what we've seen in our private polling is that the enthusiasm, which has been high with Democrats since Donald Trump got elected, is now equally high as Republicans.
So what difference will that make? And as we continue to talk, we can pull up what we referenced, the mistake that was made in the 2016 polling. The Real Clear Politics average had 46.8% for Clinton, 43.6% for Trump. And then basically it changed slightly, but the bottom line was they were wrong.
Yeah. So it gets even more complicated than that in polling, because even the public polling are showing a lot of these Senate races and governor's races are within margin of error. So that literally means, depending on the poll, it could be the result could be different between 3 to 5 points in either direction.
So the enthusiasm leading into the midterms.
So it is all about turnout, Heather. That is all we're looking at. So in tight races like the Gillum versus DeSantis in Florida's governor's race is going to come down to turnout. That's where we start looking at the enthusiasm. And one thing Donald Trump does better than any president record is turning out his base. So these critical stops he's been making in these Senate races very well make the difference.
But then you have to break it down even further as to the different demographic groups in terms of turnout.
So you totally hit it right. If you look at places like Arizona and Nevada, Latino turnout could make the difference easily between 1 to 5 points. And what we do know historically is that, yes, Latinos in general don't like this president. However, Latinos are terrible midterm voters, and they historically have been. We saw in the California primaries for governor that there was a candidate, the former mayor of L.A., Antonio Villaraigosa, that thought he could sneak into the top 2. And they were saying, well, Latinos are going to turn out in record numbers because they hate this president, and there's a Latino on the ballot. Wrong. The Latinos turned out in the same percentage that they have in every midterm cycle before. So if that happens, you're going to look at races like Florida and others that are all going to tilt Republican.
So a difference between actual enthusiasm and actual turnout.
Exactly.
So we have to pay attention to that.
Also, people lie to pollsters all the time. So when they say they're going to vote,
Trump supporters.
It's just like if I ask somebody, are you going to church on Sunday? I'm going to say I'm going, but that doesn't actually mean I'm going.
Or people that are afraid or hesitant to admit that they're a Trump supporter.
And that is a growing problem we have in the business.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
appreciate it. We'll see what happens. Well, the time now is about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. An outrage boiling over after this ridiculous remark mocking a veteran running for Congress who lost his eye fighting in Afghanistan. Listen.
You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie.
Well, Carly Shimkus is... Well, welcome back. You're watching Fox and Friends First. Saturday Night Live hitting a new low by poking fun at a veteran who is running for Congress. Listen to this.
You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie. I'm sorry. I know he lost his eye in war or whatever.
Unreal. Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7. SiriusXM 115 is here with that American Heroes response. This really, had a lot of people fired up over the weekend on Twitter.
Yeah, good morning, Heather. So Pete Davidson says Crenshaw lost his eye in war or whatever. But to expand upon that, what really happened is he nearly lost his vision after a bomb exploded in Afghanistan when he was serving in 2012. Despite being told he may never see again, he eventually regained vision in his left eye and went on to serve 2 more deployments. Crenshaw now responding and taking the high road, tweeting, "Good rule in life. I try hard not to offend. I try harder not to be offended." That being said, I hope at NBC at SNL recognizes that vets don't deserve to see their wounds used as punchlines for bad jokes. Meanwhile, NBC and SNL say they will not be responding to the situation, but plenty of other people on social media are, many outraged by by this comment. Roman says, I grew up watching SNL, but the more it gets involved in politics, the less funny it becomes. I don't care if you are liberal, Democrat, or Republican, making fun of a war vet who was injured in the line of duty is just low. Barry on Twitter also chiming in saying this, SNL's sad attempt to get ratings. Most people stopped watching years ago. Thank you for your service, Commander. Good luck Tuesday, sir. And Tim on Twitter also saying, Mr. Crenshaw, I don't necessarily agree with your politics, but I respect and appreciate your service to our country and your personal sacrifice. Thank you for caring enough about our great country to run for Congress. Dan Crenshaw is running for a congressional seat in Texas.
So NBC and SNL and Pete Davidson, they have no comment. They're not going to comment?
I mean, as of now, neither have. So we'll have to wait and see if, as the outrage continues, maybe a comment will come out of it.
Yeah, I have a feeling today they may say something. Yeah. So Michael Bloomberg, a $5 million last-minute ad?
Yeah, that's right. And he is sort of touting Democrats as the thing that will heal the national divide. Take a listen.
At this moment, we must send a signal to Republicans in Washington that they have failed to lead, failed to find solutions, and failed to bring us together. That's why I'm voting Democratic.
All right, so social media commenting on that newly released ad. Marsha says more jobs equals stronger economy. Job well done, Republicans. And then another Twitter user is just sick of all of it, saying, what a waste of money. Everyone is sick to death of ads. Please be Tuesday already. I can understand that.
Yeah, well, so big weekend in New York City this weekend. The New York City Marathon. Lots of people dressed up, but this one especially interesting.
Does it look like you're seeing double here? So this is Forrest Gump. This is Tom Hanks. This is a man who ran, we believe, the entire New York City Marathon dressed as Forrest Gump. Heather, how many miles is that again?
26.3.
Unbelievable. He's wearing khaki pants. He's wearing a button-down shirt and a red hat that does not look like a very comfortable outfit.
Full pants and a belt?
Exactly. Full pants and a belt. But we appreciate the humor involved in this. I mean, I'm seeing double here.
I do want to find out if he ran the whole race.
Yeah, like I know. Maybe he had like a tracksuit underneath or something.
Ripped it off. Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Carly. Appreciate it. Well, the time now is about almost half past the top of the hour, and it has been part of the left's platform for months.
I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE.
But what it's turned into is frankly a terrorist organization.
But that message apparently now put on ice. So why have Democrats gone silent on getting rid of... Well, welcome back. You're watching Fox and Friends First. More than 200 passengers finally touched down in London after being stranded for 3 days at 2 different airports. The travelers first boarded the British Airways plane in Orlando, where they quickly got off for a mechanical issue of some sort. They took off the next day, but had to dump fuel and make an emergency landing in New York for an entirely different issue. Passengers, including children, forced to sleep on the floor of the airport. The airline has apologized. Wow. Well, the accused in a hit-and-run crash that killed 3 Girl Scouts and their chaperone is due in court today. Police say that Colton True was drunk when he veered off the road in Wisconsin and then just plowed into the Scouts, picking up trash for community service. That's what they were doing at the time. Well, hundreds in their community holding a vigil to remember the victims. A 4th Girl Scout is injured and fighting for her life in critical condition. So let's pray for all those folks. Well, an armed Good Samaritan rushing to the rescue after a man stabs and kills a woman at a busy tourist spot. A video showing Scott Brown holding up a gun at the suspect at the Seattle Center. Watch.
I saw a girl on the ground laying in somebody's lap. It was a little nerve-wracking. The point was to hold his focus. There's people everywhere. I just kept trying to get him to put down the knife. And we just kept walking backwards and backwards and backwards.
Well, another man pepper spraying that suspect until police arrived. Police say that the woman was the mother of the suspect's child, and the 5-year-old watched it all happen. That suspect is facing first-degree murder charges. Republicans produce jobs, Democrats produce mobs. President Trump doubling down on that message while taking aim at one of the far left's most notorious groups.
You've seen it, Antifa. They take the helmet off And they take the armbands, and you see these little arms, Tough guys, you know, and they're swinging clubs viciously. They couldn't care less who they hit. These are bad people.
The president warning if the radical resistance takes power, it will move to reverse America's progress. Well, the FBI is investigating Georgia Democrats over reports of an attempted hacking of the state's voter registry. This all starting with an email from a volunteer to the party's voter protection director mentioning hacking software. With a probe launched by Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who was locked in a tight race for governor. We showed you those numbers earlier with Democrat Stacey Abrams. No data was compromised. Democrats call the whole thing a political stunt. And former President Barack Obama making his last-minute case for Democrats by taking shots at President Trump's policies.
America's at a crossroads. Perhaps most importantly, the character of our country is on the ballot.
Well, he is urging voters in Indiana to re-elect Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly, who is in a tight race with Republican challenger Mike Braun. Well, from Indiana to Texas, and despite the president's popularity in Texas, several close races are playing out across the state. As Madeline Rivers shows us, Hurricane Harvey may be to blame.
It's going to be a really great day. I think Tuesday is going to be a fantastic day.
Lizzie Fletcher has a reason to be optimistic. Despite being a relative newcomer to politics, she's got a good chance of winning the 7th congressional district in the Houston area. Though President Trump won Texas in 2016, Hillary Clinton won this district. Still, Republican incumbent Congressman John Culberson, who won his race that year, says he's likely to win.
District 7 voters are well informed. They do their homework. They know that John Culberson's the right person in the right place at the right time.
A recent poll shows the Republican edging the Democrat by just a percentage point. The close contest could be the result of an uptick of energy from the high-profile Senate race between Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Beto O'Rourke. But the shifting demographics of this district after last year's devastating hurricane also plays a part.
Harvey did a lot of damage to the district, so it's an issue for everybody, and there's a lot of new voters. And a lot of those new voters are more Democrat than the people they replaced before.
There's been record-breaking turnout for early voting, but the pressure is on to keep that momentum going on Election Day. And during the primaries in March, Republicans still outvoted Democrats. In Houston, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
Well, do you remember when Democrats called to abolish ICE? Watch this.
We are committing human rights abuses on this border and separating children from their families. And that, you know, is part of the structure of the agency. We can replace it, and we can replace it with a humane agency.
We should protect families that need our help, and that is not what ICE is doing today. And that's why I believe you should get rid of it, start over, reimagine it, and build something that actually works.
But with midterms 1 day away, Democrats appear to only have abolished the message. Joining us now to talk about it, attorney and Democratic political analyst Robert Patillo and Alana Rately, GOP strategist and secretary for the Kansas GOP. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Alana, I'll begin with you. Why do you think the difference? You know, what we heard before, they were definitely saying, oh, abolish ICE, abolish ICE. Now we don't hear it so much.
You know, I think Democrats have certainly changed their tune on abolishing ICE. They've seen that demonizing the law enforcement agency actually takes away what they could be doing to Trump. You know, they can be blaming Trump for this. And instead, when they're blaming the agency, it looks like they're trying to take away protection for the people. When you have a caravan or 4 caravans now coming into the United States, it doesn't look like such a great idea to be demonizing the agency that's protecting our people.
Robert, what do you think? Do you agree that we're not hearing it as much on the campaign trail?
Well, I think it's not about whether we're hearing it or not. We have to remember with this president that the news cycles move at 1,000 miles a minute. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about whether or not we would abolish the 14th Amendment. This week, we're talking about Antifa. So the messaging is driven by the people in charge at the top. But on the idea of abolishing ICE, let's understand this agency has only been in place since after the 9/11 attacks. It's, by having the immigration enforcement under the Department of Homeland Security, what you do is turn it into a law enforcement as opposed to an immigration apparatus. What we need to be doing is reforming the the system to get rid of the abuses of ICE. Raiding farms and birthday parties isn't what I think we want our immigration process to be. What we want to do is have a orderly and efficient process to bring new citizens in, make sure we're weeding out the bad people, and making sure that America continues to grow.
And speaking of law enforcement, since you brought it up, here's what President Trump had to say about that very thing last night at a rally in Chattanooga. Listen.
But Democrats want to abolish ICE and turn America into a giant sanctuary city for gang members and MS-13 killers. Republicans believe our country should be a sanctuary for law-abiding Americans, not criminal aliens. Republicans will always stand with the heroes of ICE and Border Patrol and law enforcement.
Ilana, your response to that?
You know, I think Trump is getting the message out, the importance of having this agency. I think we need to be protecting our borders, and immigration is certainly a very important issue right now going into the elections tomorrow. I think he's right on track and where we need to be.
So when you say, Robert, raiding immigration parties and farms, ICE is doing a lot more than that.
Well, a big part of it is, as we said, we want to make sure that ICE or whatever immigration apparatus we have in place is ensuring that we have an orderly and efficient process. Look, my mom came to America in 1981, and she didn't become a citizen until 2008. And that was because of the inefficiencies in the immigration process. Anybody who's ever tried to become a naturalized citizen understands how broken the system is. Instead of talking about criminal aliens and all these other things, exactly, she did it the correct way. And because the system is so broken, that's what takes people so long to do. We need to be working on having efficiencies in the system because, frankly, let's all be for real. Our grandparents might have had 15 kids. Our parents might have had 5. This generation might have had 3. In order for America to continue growing, we have to have an efficient immigration system.
Does it then, that being said, does it offend you when you see these groups of people trying to jump the line?
Well, you have to understand they're jumping the line out of desperation. Go down and talk to them. Don't see them as this enemy invading horde coming for the border. See them as human beings who are fleeing oppression, who are fleeing abuse, who are fleeing war, and treat them with the same humanity you would expect if you had the same situation. Don't look at them as invading Central Americans. Look at them the same way we looked at Europeans coming over at Ellis Island a century ago and treat them accordingly. Let's get a system in place that gets the right people into this country.
Alana, you get the final word.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as Europeans coming over to Ellis Island. You know, when people came over then, we had standards. We had standards they had to meet in order to come into our country, and that needs to be the same setup we have for immigrants coming in from Central America.
All right. Thank you both for joining us, Robert, Alana. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The time now is about 20 minutes until the top of the hour, and the balance of power at stake with just over 24 hours until voters head to the polls. So which party will control the next Congress? We're breaking down the different scenarios. And 'tis the season for online shopping, how Amazon just one-upped the game to make it cheaper for us.